Chief Burke, thanks for joining us here this morning on NBC5 In Depth.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When you walked back into BPD back in April after being gone 7-8 years, what was the one thing that stood out the most to you?
Actually, there was two things that struck me instantaneously. One, pulling back in the parking lot, it was almost like returning home. Yeah. And then, of course, Mr. Parmalo's name is on the front of the building. Yeah. And I thought a little bit about like his vision for shoe sales that he used to share with us about taking the shoe out of the box, right?
Okay.
And I was thinking about some of the connections that had been lost between the police department and the community. I'm like, we got to get the cops out of the cars. We got to get them back in the public spaces like the marketplace in City Hall Park.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I really thought a lot about was going in with an open mind. Although I'd spent 21 years with the organization, a lot had changed, and it was really structurally a much different police department than the one I had left.
Yeah. You mentioned back in April that better cooperation of all the services that BPD provides, that needed to happen. Do you feel like 7 months later that is at least starting to happen?
Yeah, certainly. So, and one example of that work is we've got our community support liaisons that work with us. So they're less than clinicians, social workers, and we've been figuring out ways in which they can be a primary responder to incidents like welfare check and overdose.
Right.
And we also have a partnership with the Howard Center, the street outreach team, and they've been very gracious to allow their staff to be primary responders on calls related to mental health and suicidal persons.
Yeah.
Of course, this is all dependent on danger acuity of any given incident,
right.
But it's a way to actually really kind of test the notion that civilians or professional staff could do the work of sworn police officers.
Right.
And I'll tell you, like way back in the day, police officers used to complain about the different calls that we would have to go to, and that's really simply because of the point of access. We were there 24/7 and we're plentiful. That's no longer the case across the country.
Right.
Well, police departments have high vacancy rates, and we've always been used in ways to kind of firm up or help stand up social services. And now we have an opportunity here in Burlington to use those two entities, I think, more effectively.
You talk about those vacancies rates. What are your numbers at this point? I know, a year ago it was in the high 60s. Where's the number at right now? Where would it ideally be at?
Right, so this is not a great outlook. So right now we sit at about 60 police officers on staff. A couple of things that we're doing, of course, to try to bring on more folks that we'll talk about is our recruitment strategy.
Yeah.
Really, when we talk about where we would like to be, we have to measure that in what we can accomplish in any given year. So the police academy runs twice a year.
Yeah.
We know that we've got enough field training officers to receive just about 4 recruits from each class. So we are really aiming to put 4 recruits in each class starting in February of 26.
And there's a real push. You have a lot of new videos, and you've been at a lot of different events like the Champlain Valley Fair, and you guys are actively recruiting out there, right?
Yeah, and that's really something that's changed nationwide as well. Police departments historically could just kind of sit back and allow applications to roll in,
right,
and we could take the best of that.
Yeah.
Now those application numbers are down substantially across the country, and particularly in cities like Burlington that have had some real public-facing struggles. And we knew that our team is doing fantastic work. The officers and professional staff that work for us, they all have a why, the reason why they come to work for BPD. And we want to hone in on marketing that why and getting into the platforms where we know our demographic is, and that's social media in large part. Then also the public events such as the fair, various college events. I mean, those are ripe for recruits as well, but excellent opportunities for staff to interact with the public, to really build that relationship, to show that BPD is still here and we're building back really strong.
Let's talk about some of the actions that have happened recently. The resolution by City Council back in August to have an increased patrol in and around City Hall Park. The numbers seem to show that it's working, but with a little bit of a side effect, right?
Yeah, certainly. So we really kind of focused sharply on Church Street and City Hall Park beginning last April. So the one thing that I was really comfortable with in terms of a patrol deployment when I went back in the spring is the disorder downtown is really perennial. So you have to be you kind of have to get ahead of it. I think some of the perception of those efforts were that, yeah, the cops are present, but they're really not enforcing the law. But we had been sharing data with the Police Commission and Public Safety Committee of City Council throughout the summer to show that not only were our engagements up, number of foot patrol, directed patrols in these areas, but our enforcement numbers were quite higher, or substantially higher than the previous 5 years. The resolution really asked us to hone in on City Hall Park and the marketplace, which we have done so.
Yeah.
And of course, we know because of the number of unmet social service needs that we have in the community that we're going to displace some of that. And we've seen some of that behavior pushed out a couple of blocks and then as far out as Battery Park.
How do you deal with that?
So again, the resolution is in place, and we need to maintain a steady public safety presence in the downtown, especially as we're near the holiday season.
Yeah.
And then, we really have to lean on social service providers, and I believe, the governor's 14-point plan kind of indicates that this work needs to be done, that we've got to start finding other resources. When we look at criminal justice data, we know that our top 20 consumers of police services in the city of Burlington, 18 of those top 20 are unhoused, and we don't have resources for that.
Yeah.
And even folks that do become entangled in the criminal legal system, if they're released on conditions of release or given an order to connect with a social service provider, if you're kind of going back out into the street, you have no place to live, you're facing your triggers, it's not shocking to us in the business that this behavior repeats itself time and time again. But again, this is also kind of led to the opportunity of the governor and the mayor coming together on this 14-step plan, the special docket to kind of chip away at the backlog in the criminal legal system, and then to better coordinate, especially like pretrial services,
right,
and accountability in that realm, and then also social service providers and what's accountability look like for their clients that are in the community but have certainly not been adhering to social norms and making others feel unsafe in City Hall Park or unsafe on the marketplace.
Let me ask you, we're a couple of weeks into this with the state police patrols being downtown for at least a number of hours. Are we seeing results of that at this point?
Yeah, so I think there's data points obviously, and then there's an emotional kind of relief.
Yeah, sure.
And the state police have been fantastic partners in being present on the marketplace in City Hall Park, especially when Burlington police officers are called away to attend to other emergency calls. So I would say that it's been really a successful partnership in that regard. Yeah. The enforcement numbers are strong through November, but the weather is turned sharply especially in the favor of what we face in policing. Sure. So as it gets cold and snowy, folks do find shelter in other places, and there's less, kind of people hanging out in City Hall Park, leading to the things that we get a lot of complaints about: public drug use, public disorder, public drinking, and similar.
According to our reporting, you're going to play a key role in the selection of the new or next police chief. The mayor had hoped to have a qualified candidate by the end of 2025. Are we getting pretty close to that? And what are you looking for in that person? Someone to implement what you've already tried to improve upon the last 8 months?
Yeah, so the search for the permanent chief is that process has just begun. So the end of 2025, that's not going to be a metric that's achieved.
Yeah.
So the International Association of Chiefs of Police is going to lead that. They've been in town the last few weeks, and they're developing what they call as the candidate profile.
Okay.
And then they'll go out and look across their network and establish a process for Burlingtonians to screen that person to serve as their new chief. I think that's going to take a few more months.
Yeah.
But that's not a terrible thing, because it is really a critical decision point when a community is going to install a permanent police chief. In terms of what I think that person should do, I think they're going to come in with really great ideas, hopefully maybe some bold ideas about where policing could go in the city of Burlington. I really see my role as being, kind of a person that can provide stability to the police department.
Sure.
I know that the relationships have improved with key partners such as the mayor's office, the state attorney's office, and others. And we're actually really leaning in on the data side of things in terms of our investment downtown of our police resources, because really with the the few officers that we do have, you have to use them very, very efficiently. And I like to remind members of the public that everything that we do in the city of Burlington in terms of a police service right now comes at the expense of something else.
Right.
So there's simply like things that we can't do in advancing neighborhood policing objectives.
Yeah.
And really, whether it's me here today as the police chief or a new permanent police chief in the months ahead, there's not a lot of difference that you can do or make if you don't have the officers to do the work in terms of meeting those individual neighborhood expectations. But I feel like when you look across the city, that overall we're doing really an exceptional job with what we have, not only with our sworn officers, but with our professional staff that we work in concert with.
The holidays are about to get here. What's your message to people who might be on the fence if they read the headlines about the city of Burlington over the last year and what's gone on downtown? As far as people wanting to get downtown, wanting to shop, dine, what's your message to them as far as maybe advice on how to stay safe?
Yeah, certainly. So, Burlington is not any different than any other major city. We do have incidents of violence. What I do like to remind folks is that these incidents that we're investigating that are in the headlines are the ones that involve people that are known to one another and are typically involved in some type of dispute.
Yeah.
And, in Burlington, that dispute is typically over drugs. I would encourage people to come downtown and see it for yourself, because we get nothing but thanks and praise from members of the public. And Burlington, especially during the month of October, there was more foot traffic on the marketplace, and people were having an enjoyable experience. And we know in this business that people make a vibrant atmosphere. Vibrancy kind of pushes out nefarious actors, and that really leads to a marketplace in City Hall Park for everyone to enjoy. So I'd encourage everyone to come downtown, enjoy everything Burlington has to offer. I know that we're right around the corner from the tree lighting event. That should be an exciting day, starting with the Santa Parade, leading up to the tree lighting at about 7 p.m. And I would really like to see those blocks filled with people preparing for the holiday season.
All right, we'll be there. Chief, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, I appreciate it.